Yellowstone supervolcano's geographical mysteries solved by a 4D model. This is by Christopher Kincaid, Professor of Oceanography, University of Rhode Island, on The Conversation. He said, over 20 years ago, with Ross Griffiths of the Australian National University, we aimed to build a 4D model which could replicate the Earth's tectonic processes. Now our research has helped us understand how some of America's most mysterious geographical formations took place. We wanted to build a new lab apparatus for simulating subduction zones. As we know, the Farallon Plate of the Pacific Ocean is subducting underneath the west coast and even into Yellowstone supervolcano. He says now these subduction zones, these are regions of the Earth where cold, dense oceanic plates meet less dense continental plates and descend into the Earth's mantle. The mantle is a viscous layer between the Earth's crust and the outer core. Subduction is a dominant force driving movement of such plates and one of the features that makes Earth unique in the solar system. Our goal was to represent pressures and movements in the mantle as it responded to the sinking oceanic plates, as well as to thermal evolution, which is movement of heat from the core to the surface. Many areas of science and engineering have a long tradition of employing analog rather than computerized models to represent larger scale processes. And just as toys like planes, boats, and dolls can be modeled to represent larger versions using scale factors, laboratory experiments may be used to model the mantle system by employing certain dynamic scale factors. Please support my Patreon channel since YouTube has again demonetized my YouTube channel. My Patreon channel will have 5 different videos from my YouTube channel every day. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below. To our 3D analog model, we added a 4th dimension, which is time. We used a fiberglass plate to represent the Earth's subducting oceanic plate and high viscous corn syrup to represent the Earth's mantle. 3 features make corn syrup a nice analog for the mantle. Like the mantle, the fluid is inertia-free. This means that when forces are moved, the flow stops immediately. Corn syrup has a temperature-dependent viscosity, so heat makes it runny, while cold makes it strong and unyielding. It also scales well to the model and can provide a nice dessert after the work is complete. We first used our apparatus to study a number of general aspects and mechanisms of subduction zones without focusing on any particular region. But all that changed when we joined a diverse group of geoscientists interested in determining the cause of some strange magma activity in the Pacific Northwest over the last 20 million years. The focus then became an odd volcanic tract in central and eastern Oregon in the United States called the High Lava Plains. The goal was to connect the dots between the High Lava Plains and 2 other notable geographic features: the Columbia River flood basalts and the Snake River Plain. This area around Yellowstone Park is the epicenter of much debate in the earth sciences. A number of scientists have said that the Columbia River flood basalts and Snake River Plain are the expression of surfacing mantle plume. The mantle plume is made of hotter, less dense rock, buoyed up through the mantle towards the Earth's surface. They represent the kinds of plumes that we see every day: hot air balloons, lava lamps, pasta sauce on a stove, and steam plumes from industrial towers are all common examples where less dense fluid or air rises through denser material. In the mantle, plumes take on a classic shape: a large bulbous leading volume called the plume head, followed by a thin tail called the plume conduit. The surfacing of plume heads has been linked with huge outpourings of basalt called large igneous provinces, LIPs, while tails are commonly proposed as a cause of linear volcanic tracts like the Hawaiian island chain in the Pacific. But for our area, a plume was not the most obvious suspect. One issue is that the Columbia River flood basalts and the Snake River Plain are not laid out in a linear pattern as would be expected if a plume surfaced beneath the westward drifting North American continental plate. Instead, the two features seem broken, with the Snake River Plain track displaced well south of the flood basalts. Nor does the high lava plains volcanic track fit the classic plume model. It's odd for two reasons. It appears west of the flood basalts and its magma output grows younger towards the west. We would intuitively expect the opposite. As the plate moves west, the head of the plume should arrive at the first surface, causing the flood basalts, while the tail should cause a track of volcanic activity that grows younger towards the east, just like the Snake River Plain. To accurately represent this complex subduction system, we needed to include a number of features. One of these was a phenomenon called rollback subduction, which is when the sinking oceanic plate rolls back underneath itself as it descends into the mantle. We also had to represent the extension of the overriding plate. The overriding plate is made up of buoyant continental crust and heavily chilled mantle, and the dense oceanic plate, which has only a sliver of crust, sinks beneath the overriding plate. Between the sinking and overriding plates lies what is referred to as the mantle wedge, the source region for volcanic arcs that roughly parallel the trench in most subduction zones. The project's pièce de résistance was the representation of the mantle plume, where we could control the plume's buoyancy and position. We did this by using a modified pressure cooker, where corn syrup was heated and then injected through a heated pipe into the base of the tank. By controlling its temperature, we control the density, viscosity, and the rise rate of the plume. Most prior models inject plumes into a simplified fluid environment. Models which incorporate both subduction and the plume show this simple view is not sufficient. Rollback motion produces vigorous flow from the back of the front to the front of the subduction plate, and this is known as a toroidal flow. This is like a super large eddy in the mantle, and our results showed that toroidal flow had a big impact on the buoyant plume feature. In the initial stages, we released the plume into a tank of still fluid, where it evolved in textbook fashion. A large leading head formed, which rose to the surface, stalled and spread out, and behind this was a narrow conduit through which the plume fluid was continuously fed from the base to the surface of the tank. But as soon as we turned the plates on, it was apparent this simple morphology was no longer in play. Circulation currents driven by the plates immediately deformed both head and tail, dramatically limiting the ability for continued upward buoyant motion, and as the toroidal flow moved around the edge of the sinking plate, it effectively took a bite out of the plume head, drawing the material into thin lens and dragging it towards the edge of the subduction plate. The remains of the plume surface in a pattern that matches the local and timing of the high lava plains. The unchewed part of the plume head rose and surfaced as a big pulse of heated, melting substance similar to the flood basalts. The plume tail tilted over beneath the westward drifting overriding plate, leaving patterns of heating and melting that grew younger to the east, just like the Snake River Plains. The toroidal flow not only bit the head in half, it also pushed the tail well to the south, matching the real feature. This is how corn syrup helped us understand how a single plume could be responsible for the Columbia River flood basalts, the southerly deflection of the Snake River Plains, and the bizarre westward younging high lava plains track. So you can see all that area with the mantle plume underneath basically is somehow connected to Yellowstone supervolcano. Thank you for your support, and please leave your comments. Thank you.